What the dog doing? Where the bear at?
Where the bear at?
I was watching one of these like Watch Mojo or like Game Ranks, like top 10 list things. You know, the thing that you do at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to fall asleep and inevitably can't because you're watching YouTube videos. And it was one of those videos about the like scandals in Warcraft, where like something about like the plague that somebody came in, they brought like a animal familiar in that then caught the plague and then spread out through
the great
all these
Ogremar
servers.
plague.
Yeah, or another one where some character like pretended to be the barbarian of some group, led them into this like permadeath server, and then like backed out from it like opposite Leroy Jenkins style, and the whole guild got wiped out except for 2 people. Like as a World of Warcraft player / streamer, have you ever encountered any of these kind of things, or been like on the periphery to any of these like big scandal moments?
The ZG plague. Yes, absolutely. Remember the piles of bodies just littering the major cities, and to the point of like, no, you actually like, you can't go in there. You can't go in there. And then like some like well-meaning healers were like, I'll heal the plague. And it's like, nah, you're dead. You're dead. Everybody's just dead. Yeah, it's an incredible event to go through.
How does that even work for like a familiar? Like your familiar can catch diseases?
You weren't supposed to, and that was the bug.
The bug, yeah. Somebody found a hack, I think, or like a sort of a loophole in the rules. Yeah.
I think it was an innocent mistake that like they put a new patch in the game, and then that bugged out that particular encounter. Somebody came back to Ogremar after their raid and just spread it. Like, I think it was an innocent event, honestly. But then people just absolutely went to town with it. they were intentionally trying to spread the plague throughout the rest of the game. To the point that they've actually used the game data for not plague transmission. Like, they know how germs spread. They wanted to know how people spread it, because sometimes people spread it intentionally. So they were using models from that event during the pandemic.
Who was patient zero? Leroy Jenkins?
No. Oh, no.
No, obviously.
No. Actually, I don't know the name, but it was definitely a hunter. And I guess if it started in Ogremar, it would have been a Horde player. So
Ogremar reminds me of a TV show that I used to watch back in the 90s, Real Time with Ogremar. New rules, no paladins. Wait,
never heard that before.
It's not Bill Maher, isn't that like Dennis Miller or something like that? Like,
anyway, Dennis Miller. I used to like Dennis Miller.
Yeah,
used to.
So did his family, I think. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the Unnameable Podcast. I'm Jay.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Sandra.
And today's topics include
lore balancing.
It's a trap.
And where blades should be drawn.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. Section A is over to you, Sandra. What is your topic?
Well, we all love lore building and world building, all of the snazzy sparkle that brings our worlds to life. But there is a tipping point. So this segment is how to know when your world building is getting in the way of a good story. And I love that we have 2 DMs who, I presume, really love to drop their players into a wide world of immersion. But I'm also wondering, with the different types of people you've had at your table, when do you see those eyes glazing over?
I need more sparkle in my games, first of all.
Sparkles, yes.
Yeah, sparkle dungeon.
Well, this is somewhat of a problem for me, because I spend a lot of time building lore, and rarely will they ever discover it all. The way I kind of see it is like lore or world building. It's kind of like an amusement park, right? Mm-hmm. There's some people that are there for the rides, others for the games and food and companionship, atmosphere, and like the escape. And
who goes to the amusement park for the food?
I mean, the state fair, maybe.
$30 hot dog, yeah. Okay.
No, aren't there like people that go strictly to Disneyland just for the food? Because like
I think there are.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Those people. I haven't been to Disneyland in a long time, but I imagine those people exist.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah.
But like for me, I build based on needs. So like kind of like if an attraction is popular, you make bigger ones and you make more of them, right? But for me, no attraction should ever really be mandatory, right? Like
Hmm.
lore should never be mandatory. That's the way I see it. Okay,
I
right?
like that. I really like that. So again, do you tend to like as you're starting a new campaign, do you query your players ahead of time to try to gauge what they're hoping for from this, or is it more of an as you go, clue into what seems to be attracting them from session to session?
Well, it really depends because I know that the players that I play with on a like a on a regular basis, they are huge into lore. So that's why I put so much work into it. But I've been doing this one with new players, with three new players. And there it was an option. If they wanted to get into the lore, great, right?
Hmm.
Cuz lore can be a problem. Like um I've kind of made a list of like when lore can be a problem. It's mostly when you can't move forward without it.
Uh,
Like if you
yes.
don't like if you like say like you enter the sanctum and unless you place the statues of the Jamartha septuplets in the year of ascension in the correct slots, you cannot move. Like forget it. No, no, no.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
unless if it's obviously in that room and it's a puzzle that they can figure out, you should never force lore to stop them from moving forward. Right?
And that sounds like good game design in general, whether it's tabletop or video game or so forth.
Yep.
There
Yep.
has to be a way forward without punishing your players.
Yeah. Because again, you never know what they'll latch onto. Now, I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of players that are really into lore, and for them, like I will create universes really. Another time is when it becomes too complicated, and
Hmm.
you yourself can't easily keep track of it, right? Or when it can become misleading, like say like oh, yes, yes, the red moon beam was reflected by a mirror, but that was the mirror of baneful echoes. The red moon beam passes through your normal mirror, and you take full damage. And then their expectations are totally destroyed, right? They thought, oh,
Hmm.
I can stop with a mirror, but then you're like, no, no, it has to be a specific mirror because of the lore, right? Uh, and also when it takes up too much time or becomes possibly unnecessary, right? Like
Mm.
it makes no difference if they know this or not. It's never going to come up really.
So in general, it's the moments when you almost forget that you actually have players at your table, and you're almost like so stuck in your own lore, and you want to share it, but if there's just not engagement, then take a good hard look at what's been going on in your progress so far.
Often
That way
for
you would.
those that are more into lore, if they want more lore after the session, I can give it to them, right?
Hmm.
But like pretty much only the essentials will make it into the actual session itself. That's basically how I handle it. I try to stick with these kind of rules.
I think generally you can put out your sign that you want more lore focused players, but they tend to be the exception, the rather than the general population of players. But do you think that there's a way that you've managed to attract more of these role playing players to your games and keep them? Uh, I've had experiences where players get really frustrated that the world isn't diverse enough and they'll hop games.
You're going to gravitate towards how much or how little lore you want as a gaming group together. We mustn't forget that the process of playing this, doing this art form is a communal one, and
Mhm.
certain groups will move towards a heavy lore setting, other groups will move away from having a heavy lore setting. If you're playing a one-off in a sort of more comic realm, maybe lore is not the thing that you want. It's not necessary. Having well, to go back to something that Chris said early on, yeah, I agree. It can get in the way. There was a particular moment I remember, and this is not a criticism, Chris, of your GMing style, but we went into like a bar once, and I kind of wanted to order a particular drink from the tavern, and you said, "Hold on a second," and you had to like open up to the right town, to the right village, to the
Yeah.
right tavern, and like find out, and these are the 5 drinks that you could order, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And at one point, it was amazing that you had that depth of lore built into the game. But then at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm never gonna remember what these 5 drinks are the next time I
Right.
come back here. But
Signature cocktails.
yeah, so I think lore, in-depth lore, can become manageable when players also have a stake in the lore. And there's something of a sleight of hand that happens here when, you know, a lot of times what the GM does on sort of like the back end, as it were, in prep, is leave for opportunities when the players start interacting with the world and change it, and then adapt accordingly rather than
Mm-hmm.
following your set adventure path. And with some criticism, a lot of the new 5e adventure booklets that come out, you have to read them from start to finish in order to understand what's going on here. And they're so open-ended, but that sort of makes them, lets the group craft the story that they want to, rather than the old school adventures where it's like, okay, hit note A, hit note B, hit note C,
Mm-hmm.
blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
And so when what makes lore rich, I think, is when, you know, first players have sort of like kind of bought into it, and then usually from a GM or a good player starts to establish something that feels right. It just has a feel. And then other players start kind of like jumping in and feel the free enough to add into the world their own flavor to it, and then that just enriches it greater. It makes it feel like a much more community built thing, and also in that regard, easy to remember, because even if the GM kind of forgets what the name of the tavern that they haven't been to for X number of sessions was, the player who kind of came up with it in the moment wouldn't. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you know, that's available. Like, what is that character searching for? Oftentimes, I'll throw that back to the players as well. What are you looking for? When they
Mm-hmm.
rather than them ask me kind of like, oh, what's here for me to explore, I'll say, well, what are you looking for? And then that's there, you know. So I mean, there's ways around that, rather than having the players having to play like a kind of a strange game of 20 questions where they're keeping to asking the DM like, what's in your imagination that we don't know about yet, you know.
Now, I'd love to ask you both to answer this question. Is there a lore element that you've put into a game, whether it's a one-off or a full campaign, where you're just stunned? Like it was just like a little detail, a little coffee table off in a corner kind of a thing, but your players just absolutely grabbed onto it and it changed the course of your campaign. Is there something that stands out to you that just really surprised you that it really caught on?
All the best ones, probably.
Good
that's
answer.
All-
that's
yeah.
that's probably the best answer you can come up
Yeah.
with.
All the best ones come from a moment of just like, it's something that's nothing on the page, and then once it kind of hits the table, it becomes something totally new and unique, and you didn't expect that kind of character quirk or that naming convention, or, you know, their red hair or something as simple as that to become like something so big or so connected to it. And then it just yeah, whatever sort of machinations that comes from, player mood in the moment, whatever they seem to jump onto. It's it's a more philosophical question there, I think.
True.
uh, in terms of specific things, like I put a lot of work into crafting deities. Right.
Mm.
I love making deities and their domains and what weapons they have in their hands and other like icons, right? And I find that whenever deities pop up in my world, right, everyone is like writing furiously on their notepads, like, oh, all the specific details of certain like elements of the deity, because often they know that these kind of things will pop up again and again and again because they're important
Hmm.
parts of the world. So, but you know, whenever I take out my big list of like all the drinks that they can possibly have at the bar, that always somewhat impresses them too. So, despite what Jay says.
Having a rich pantheon of deities is very useful, I think. Yeah. Our world has that as well, I think. And then once you start crossing into different countries would have their own pantheons, and that all gets all a bit muddy, and that's where the lore can really explode. How many words for magic are there? You know, how many
Hmm.
words for this? And then it's like, oh boy. But it helps to ground you for where you are, I suppose, and kind of get tonally center the group. What about you, Sandy? What are the things that you like or dislike about kind of lore building?
Starting off with like I love the little dark alleys in places. I love going into a city. You start exploring, and just you can't help but to find those hidden corridors and those surprise characters that just like I shouldn't be here. I really should turn back. I should go back to the tourist area, but you don't, and you keep going and you risk it and you risk it. And then you have an encounter that like was this planned? Was it not? Who cares? I'm going for it. And you take those risks, and you're able to take those risks. And sometimes they slap you. You know, you're not always going to win that. But I love the dark areas of cities, and I love mysterious societies. So again, that goes into your gods, especially if you have living gods that are, not just out of reach. I love the mysterious cultures that intentionally withdraw from your primary society. Like, I need to get inside there. I need to see what they're doing. So I will wait years in somebody's campaign to get inside that place. I will not forget it. I need to get in there, and I will find a way to get in there. So yeah, it's having a mystery unsolved. I will not let that go. I will get in there eventually.
I think different experience GMs of different experience levels will appreciate that on some ways. Well, they get to sort of flex and explore their own world that they didn't think about in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Whereas other players, other GMs who sort of, no, this is the path that I've sort of crafted for you. Get back to the tourist area. Might panic there, but they should be encouraged to explore where players are leading them. I think.
Don't be afraid. Just take that journey together.
One of the best things about lore is when you've created a lore, people remember it, and then you can bring it up much later down the line, and everybody knows what you're talking about.
Oh, it's
and,
so meaningful.
It's such a great feeling. It's
all the
such a great
storytelling
feeling.
moments, the memorable moments and whatnot.
Like, I was just gonna say, like the minute like I mention like Ahala, if I say the name Ahala, everyone instantly groans around the table, like, oh, Ahala,
Yes.
oh, the goddess of vengeance, not again, right? Like everyone knows they're all jerks,
It's so easy to find the moments that really gave you the rush versus the ones where you just sort of tuned out, because you tuned out for a reason, right? I'd have to say that, and this is going to be a strange bit of an answer, but I love the moments that are meaningful to somebody else's character around the table, but I tune out when somebody else capitalizes on it, that it wasn't meant for. So if somebody starts to sort of like, there's supporting your fellow player, and I love this. I love this. Like, some of the most meaningful moments around the table are when the entire group rallies behind that character's moment. They find that god they've been looking for. They find that item that was meaningful to their family, and everybody supports it. But I have unfortunately been in situations where somebody just sort of like hijacked the moment. And if the DM isn't experienced enough to sort of divert it back to the person it was kind of meant for, that is my tune out moment. Like, and if I can't help the other player who it was for, that might actually be kind of like game ending for me. Like, I will drop out of the immersion, I'll drop out of the interest if that support isn't there for the entire team. So a bit of a strange answer there, but I have more than one memory of this happening, so it's pretty firm to me.
And I'm also a follower of that god too.
Yes, thank you. You know it.
With that note, that sounds like a wrap up. Let's move on to segment number 2. All right, moving on to our second topic, which is traps. And more in particular, it's sort of like designing what makes an interesting trap and designing perhaps the way out of a trap, and also the degree of lethality of a trap. One any veteran gamers out there will know of the famous Tomb of Horrors setting from the 80s, I believe.
That's a different kind of game in general, though.
It is a very different kind of game. It's notorious for being very deadly. There's a lot of save or die, or even touch this object and you instantly die type of moments. I found an interesting way around that in order to play that session with a modern perspective, where the characters were all kind of teleported into an orb of a wizard that they were going to run through the Tomb of Horrors, but then every time they died, their life energy, because it was just their spirit that was in the tomb. Every time they died, their spirit energy would get less and less, and so they essentially had a certain number of lives that they could spend in order to like make their way and get the sort of 70s experience without having to like walk up to it, like lose a level 9 character because you touched the wrong door handle or something
Like
like
a
that.
Prince of Persia type mechanic, right?
Like a Prince of Persia
Yeah.
mechanic in a sense, yeah. So Chris, Sandy, who wants to jump in here? Traps, what makes them good? What makes them bad? What makes them work? How do players get out of them?
Well, we need to talk about like what is the purpose of the trap. That's one of the most important things to think about when you design a trap in general. There
Mm-hmm.
are many reasons why the traps are there. One of them would be to hurt or like to drain resources, hinder or trick or like protect a certain area from the adventurers coming in. One would be to capture or lure, right? Like you think of like traps, one of those net traps in the forest, or to test their worthiness, or to remind them that the world is dangerous. Or also there are meta reasons as well. Like it means like to break up the flow of play or give the location itself a little bit more character, right? Whenever I'm doing traps, I rarely, unlike the Tomb of Horrors, I rarely make traps lethal because nobody wants to die to a trap. They'd rather die to the big bad doing his thing, right?
Yep,
Of course,
absolutely.
I'm sure like it should happen, but maybe I don't know. Maybe not often.
If the final sort of trap, as it were, is something like if you're playing in, let's say, like a war setting, that is the grenade that a soldier can jump onto and
Yeah.
sacrifice themselves for the rest
Hmm.
of the party, then that might work at the end of a big epic encounter where the players are all escaping the dungeon and there's one last trap that needs to be triggered in order to open the doorway. But that by doing that, it's going to, blah, blah, blah. There's a risk involved, a nice 50-50 roll, really exciting moment at the end of an adventure path. I think it could work there.
Yeah, so often for me, when it comes to traps, it's often thinking about the purpose of the trap and then theming the trap so that it fits the setting, and
Hmm.
also then bringing back the trap. Like I like doing the trap more than once, so that they can either fall for it again, or feel good about avoiding it,
Hmm.
or using it to their advantage. Right? Those are like kind of like the steps for traps. I do like to like bring a trap back again, so that it just makes them feel really good.
You bring up an interesting dilemma that I was thinking about when we were discussing these topics. It's when you as a player can see that trap a mile away. Like whether you're just so familiar with the DM or the group or the setting, but your character is gonna fall for it. Like you have to RP that the character's gonna fall for it. And what I was curious to ask both of you about was the dynamic here. Like, do you know that your player is gonna fall for it? Like, assuming you're playing with an RP focused group, when you build a trap, do you go, they're gonna notice this, or oh no, if they're playing true to their character, they're gonna fall into this. How often do you factor that in to your trap design?
50-50, I think. I'll oftentimes, you try to design encounters that fit within the location, but then also with back of your mind thinking about like what the character's skill sets are and
Yeah.
what
Hmm.
might be interesting for them to encounter and whatnot. I like your framework, Chris, where you talked about situations where a trap or a series of traps in a room that could then eventually be capitalized upon during a combat encounter where they're then throwing the goblins into the traps and now they're using
I
them
love
to
that.
their benefit. That makes it a combat encounter really fun and
Yeah,
fluid and
absolutely. Yep.
dynamic and whatnot.
It's like Home
Uh,
Alone for in a dungeon, right?
yeah, yeah. You never want to really have like a trap. Like traps are sort of nexus points where like getting past them will either lead to a secret area that is not necessary to get to, or in a way, a conversation encounter can be a trap point. By even talking to this person in such a way. If you think about what's happening mechanically, they're not too much different from disarming a trap and whatnot. Um, there are difficulties here when you say, you know, like me as a rather dim player are choosing to is I'm choosing to play the 20 intelligence level player, and I can't quite figure out what the how to solve this trap is. Well, then this is where the GM says roll your intelligence, then you figured it out, right? There's
right. Yeah.
This is another aspect that we could talk about, but I think Chris, you wanted to jump in here.
You pretty much said most of it. Like, there are also different kinds of traps, right? Like going into the theming of the trap or how it fits the setting. There are like types of traps. There are of course like the classic mechanical traps, like hidden pits or like swinging axes or snakes dropping on you. There are like natural traps, right? Like I love doing this, like these drowsy spore mushrooms, right? You touch them and they poof, and then suddenly you're asleep. You got to make a Constitution saving throw or whatever, right? Or like even just like muddy slopes or rough terrain kind of stuff. Magical traps, like triggered glyphs containing spells, often used by like sorcerers and people that are protecting a great vault of wondrous items. There are tactical traps too, right? Like flanking an enemy or surrounding an enemy. And there's also, like you had mentioned, like there are also social or like ethical traps, right? Like, who are you gonna save? Are you gonna save Robin or was it Nicole Kidman?
Oh yeah, Batgirl, yeah. It's a great moment in a less than stellar movie. But Batman Forever for the younger listeners out there. With Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, an erudite choice.
If you can believe it.
If you can believe it, yeah. I had the McDonald's cups when they came out. Anyways, showing my age here. One of the difficult design choices for coming up with traps is trying to find a way to justify them being in a place at all. It's like, oh, this is a functional building that people are coming in and out of to protect it. And why would they possibly have all these things that potentially could kill them all along the way? And even if it's a derelict place, why would it still be functioning? And you could play with that it's going to be this big trap dungeon. And then when you get there, all the traps are broken, but then that makes them even worse or something like that, because now the way to sort of like untrigger them, it doesn't work anymore or backfires, and the wall that blocks all the acid liquid that pours out now just collapses and what have you. There's so much sort of expectation you can play with the tropes here.
But like some of these traps, they can be set up like traps but not have the intention of being traps. Like I said, like there could be a floorboard that's very like it's been damaged over time, and and when you step on it, it creaks and then it snaps through, right? 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 Or like I said, the drowsy spore mushrooms, they're not sitting around just being like, hey, someone's gonna come and touch me, and then poof, right? Like they could be like, this is my defense, right? So it's not necessarily that all traps have to be with purpose, right? And you can treat them the same way, right?
GM should think about is making traps sort of like a multi check process as well, like disarming the bomb. You got 3 checks that you got to make in order to get through here, or that can make them really exciting rather than a single check. But
I think that depends on the lethality, though, right? Like certainly ones that are incredibly dangerous should have multiple checks.
Or simply complicated. So the rogue is having to be defended while they are figuring out a way to open the door, while all the aggro fellows are keeping off hordes and hordes of the mooks that are running in. I did want to mention something before we get away from the topic. Is an interesting way to design the way in which a trap is disarmed, and sometimes the best thing to do as a GM is simply not design and have an idea in your mind, because the players will come up with something better in the moment.
True.
If you have a trap in mind, but then you just throw enough other stuff in the room, some player will draw a connection between those two things with one of their skill sets and a magic ability that they have in order to I'm going to ricochet the thing off the whatever, and then that just creates a much better solution that you could have possibly designed in the moment, and the character feels great for being able to come up with it. And then you as GM can talk about, yeah, exactly, you totally figured out the right answer. Even though I didn't design that at all.
Such a smart trap.
Though one must be careful not to fall in one's own design traps, which is perhaps last weekend I may have fallen into one where the players were investigating something of a kind of trickster gambler character who they've been hunting down, and as they're walking into his sort of lair, so to speak, all of the kind of ways in, they had to get through a series of kind of vault doors that were all based on like sort of logic puzzles that regarded like flipping trump cards over, or dice, uh, games of dice and chance, and then chess. And then like we got to a certain moment where there was a particular tricky chess puzzle that they had to solve in two with a timer. And if they didn't, there was going to a battle was going to ensue. And because they didn't figure out like the battle stop, and then we ran out of session time. So I think that can be troublesome areas if players sort of find that like they're being maybe picked on, because like I'm a quite a consider myself quite a I'm trying to up my chess game, so I've been playing a lot of it, and I thought the puzzle was quite easy, and then I found my players kind of stumped by no, I don't mean that as a slander, but it's sort of like you just have to one has to be careful about bringing kind of like real world knowledge into the game space there, and perhaps a way of introducing kind of like wisdom checks to give hints here and there or whatnot, but.
Yeah, using the in-game mechanics, like you said, if you have, or Chris was saying that if you have the, player who wants to play the intellect but maybe isn't on par with the character that they want to be playing, and you use their sheet to bridge that gap. In this particular case, yeah, people don't know card games, they don't know chess, they don't know whatever. That would have been a way to bridge it, but at the same time, it's interesting because when you design things like that have a real world tie-in, you tend to be surprised at who's the one who's going to pick up and actually succeed with that puzzle, right? You're not pre-assuming whose hero moment that's going to be. In that particular scenario that you're talking about, I was surprised we all passed one of those puzzles, and I didn't particularly expect who succeeded to go with that puzzle. So sometimes that's just fun, even on a player and character level.
Yeah. To jump in, the one of the other things is we were talking with in the last segment about lore and lore building and all the details to gods. I find, especially when you have had crafted certain elements to a god. So the god carries a blade in his right hand and a quill in the other. Well, that has a sort of like a metaphoric implication of wars in the east and whatever scholarly library in the west or something like that. And you've created sort of perhaps metaphoric connections that you can then draw on for like lore based traps later on and puzzles and things like that they've got to solve, that then players could, even just by making an obscure connection that may not have even been there in the initial drafts, has now become lore through the process of solving the trap.
So from the player perspective on that, I think the key to being able to use these fun bits of lore as the solutions is repetition. Not obvious ones, but just, oh, you're exploring this temple and you see the sword, the pen motif, and you just pass by. You just let them keep exploring, but it's a blip here. A couple weeks later, it's a blip here, and then you use it a year from now, if you want to. But repetition, because the same occurs in writing novels, that if you need something to really stick in your reader's mind, it's got to pop up more than once. So the same psychology is here. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that sounds like segment. Let us move on to our sponsors. Sorry.
You bastard!
You bastard. Past the chamber of shifting coffins and the blood mirror of scrying is an uneven path gouged from the heart of the mire. It reeks of pungent decomposition, triggering a warning that for every poisoned breath means accepting its horrid essence. Lit with menacing purple flames captured in tall obsidian lanterns sits a vast ellipsoid room adorned with ancient scrawlings of a lost language peering out from behind the twisted and decaying willow roots that snake their way from ceiling to floor, like cords of rotten lightning. A collection of thousands of blood-encrusted daggers hang in the air 5 feet apart and sit motionless. The slanted ground is littered with the putrefying husks of unworthy heroes and fools. Pooled at the bottom swirls a wild ashen vortex of ghastly shadows, constantly dragging you towards it, and in each inch closer you can feel their invisible claws attempting to tear your soul from your mortal vessel. Now waist deep in that vortex stands Nidasella Dunarl, the fabled witch of the Nagrim Mire, and in her arms the kidnapped Titelvi, forcefully receiving her baptism of corruption. We are talking about memorable locations for combat.
Yeah, heroes and fools leading the bottle, says Knock the Halfling. This is like, seems like they're all fools to die in this wretched place. Yeah, very descriptive, very exciting, and like now you're ready for it, right?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much the idea. Was just to give them a description of a room that I would prepare for the final battle, shall we say?
I found myself compelled to respond in character, in a sense.
I'm ready for a dark baptism. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah,
Sign me up.
yeah. Nidasilla's taking names, you know.
Ooh. Me next.
Miga. Sorry, that's a
I have no idea what that is a reference to.
Carmina Burana. It's never mind. Everyone knows O Fortuna, famously used in the movie Excalibur, what have you. But
so yes, let's talk about memorable locations, or how to build a memorable location, like the elements of a powerful location that your players will talk about for years to come. What makes a great location?
For me, it's the place where, as I call the battle unexpected. Everything's calm. It's maybe you're traveling on the road with your companions. You have your vision. You know where you need to head. You know where the action is, and it's not here. And you're just having those character moments. You're having those calm before the storm, and all of a sudden the storm shows up right behind you, right from the side, right from the mountain tops, wherever, and then you're in it. It's the thing you didn't prepare for that, for me, always stays in mind. A good example for this was a previous campaign I was a part of, where we were traveling the King's Road. We were so far from our destination, where we were hoping to be able to raise an army. Just 3 people traveling the road, trying to get where they're going. And all of a sudden, 2 enemy forces converge on us. We shouldn't be there. They one force was heading in its own direction for war. The other just opportunistically, found 3 people to just basically mug along the road. And by some crazy twist of roles and fate, we let those 2 enemies fight it out and got the hell out of there. But the shivers, the moment of everything, of being in this valley with these 2 enemies coming at you, and they shouldn't be there. That, to me, sets up for an incredible, memorable battle.
For me, as I find ways to sort of improve my game as a GM. I'm always looking for more and unique ways to run a battle encounter, and stuff that can maybe gives me challenges in which to explain a region or how things are moving about within that space, since I'm using primarily theater of the mind stuff. And that's usually done through a series of 6 T's, T words. That is a threat, a trap, a timer, a treat, terrain, and a twist, potentially, with the 6th one being option.
Oh, very good.
So I mean, every battle encounter is going to need a threat. What is the threat? Sometimes there's multiple ones, as Sandra just mentioned. That makes it even more complicated when you have multiple threats with multiple goals in mind, and everyone's trying to sort of get the MacGuffin or whatever the case may be. A trap, like we had discussed in the previous segment, that it can be capitalized upon, or that everyone is sort of dealing with at the same time while the combat is going on. Again, a timer, maybe the You are having the battle on the top of a cascading wagon that's heading towards the cliff face, or before the engaging enemy dragon comes with its weapon to ruin everyone's day, or as the dungeon fills up with water, or in one particular encounter they were in a sand temple that sort of turned on its side, and after having navigated all the way into the depths of the temple, now the temple is vertical and they're having to work their way out of the depths to the entrance, which is now above them, right? And that creates some interesting things. Treat, of course, is what can they get out of the encounter? What else is there? Are there other sort of things laying around? Is it happening in a battlefield of which a holy order of paladins was slain and all the holy artifacts are laying around, and then the threat of an undead army comes around, but then these artifacts can be picked up and used in the moment, whatnot. Terrain is an obvious one, making it more obvious, making it something of a sticking point. Is it high up? Is it on a moving platform? Is it somewhere? Is it full of ice, mud, rain, fog, whatever it is? And then twist, is there something else that isn't quite there yet, but it's coming later that then changes the combat encounter? Put all those things, not in every combat encounter, but having them in the back of your mind in most of them, and you get a pretty memorable combat encounter. I have another criterion for epic combat encounters, but I'll save that for later, because maybe there's some responses or comments about that list.
No, that is a fantastic list. That pretty much marks all the things that I would have added. So, well done.
Well,
And that's the end of that. That's the end of that segment. No.
Well, okay. How about where are some interesting places fights have happened? We did what was it? Tyranny of Dragons? Was it Tyranny of Dragons? And of course, one of the most famous fights that everybody remembers is Jay. Do you remember?
Was this the one on the floating castle with the cloud giant and Chris's? Yeah.
Yep. That's the one.
That was pretty fun.
That was pretty crazy. It was pretty chaotic.
Probably
probably had most of the elements there on your list.
The combat became all the more memorable because of a great hero moment for when the cleric had stopped to defend against the breath weapon of the dragon and what have you. But I particularly like terrains that have some sort of unstable element. You were talking before about platforms that are on an angle or muddy, or in the kind of clockwork mechanism of some kind of ancient thing that all the gears are moving around and what have you. And then that just adds a whole degree of excitement and verticality or what have you to it. And I quite like that. Things that move, things that move about, or that you don't get to see it a lot in video games and what have you, but a combat terrain that changes over the course of the battle. So maybe the battlefield is kind of dry and sunny by the start of it, but it's a rainy, muddy mess towards the end, and that adds some sort of degree of escalation and change as it moves on.
For me, I did an encounter in an ooze factory, and that was so much fun.
Oh God! Oh, that must have been so messy.
Because pretty much in this factory, they could turn the levers and things like that, and oozes would come out, and then they'd be part of the fight, right? Because the oozes are sentient, right? So, in my world, we use oozes only strictly for sewers, right? Just to clean sewers out. So people will buy oozes and have them sent to their city, right? So there's a company called Hazagel that's their thing, is producing more oozes, and they had a fight in that ooze gel center, and they were releasing oozes and then putting them down drains and things like that, and it was just spigots a turning.
Oh, that sounds like madness.
do you have a drunken ooze salesman NPC who's a booze schmooze ooze peddler?
Boozy ooze?
A boozy ooze smoosher?
Boozy booze smoosher.
Sorry.
I think we need to be drunk to pull that one off.
Yeah. Sandy?
I'm quite unexpectedly fond of sea battles.
Mm.
You know, I I find it interesting that when you enter a battle scenario, good sense would have you run away as often as possible, right? So I like these encounters where, leaving the area is not an option. And sea battles tend to give you that. I've been in scenarios where they were large scale. So, your ship against this ship, controlling a whole fleet, and that has a certain feel to it. But also just fighting strictly at that, like micro level on your own ship versus a raiding party, say. So these kind of like close quarters, where your movement is restricted. You have so many people, you can't like almost like have player collision and things like that. I like that kind of intricacy. There we go. um, so for me, like upping the difficulty of your terrain because it's tight quarters, lots of stuff, lots of dangers. You know, if in your example, Chris, you have one player releasing an ooze and the other player's not aware of it, can they suddenly become friendly fire? So yeah, having a lot of material to interact with to me makes for a really really good encounter.
My friend has a 2-year-old. They're always releasing ooze. All the
Ooh.
time. Hey, Jay, can I have a raisin? Oh God! Roll for it.
Oh,
Roll for
oh,
initiative.
oh, go away. Does psychic damage seeing that.
Which is what I wanted to get at. Memorable combat encounter for me was a situation a few years back where the story had culminated into this sort of like grand scale campaign moment where armies are on the move, navies are on the move, fleets are going, everything's gonna kind of coming to a pass, and the I have a background from playing a lot of kind of hex encounter war games, kind of Avalon Hill style for the old grognards out there, and know like how to kind of like design a very quick kind of war game off the fly using kind of CRTs and things like this. Um, Anyone who know they're pretty much rolled to hit tables with a various distribution of hits and misses and whatnot. And then within that kind of almost like mini game, which is kind of magnified to become a very rich, large battle scenario, the individual encounter is happening within these sort of like blocks of counters that are moving through a hex field. And so you're indicating the larger battle that's sort of like moving along, but then within that you kind of zoom back in to see what's happening within that sort of like phalanx, what's happening within that ship here and there, and you're zooming over to other parts of the continent where this battle is going on, and everything just sort of like ties together in this like really massive multi and kind of epic feeling encounter. So in that case, it's not these sort of while there are elements of threat, trap, timer, treat, terrain, twist, and all that, it instead makes the combat memorable by its sheer kind of scale and like epicness and stuff like that, and having the character feel like that they're just part of this massive mechanism of war or whatever. And when they get out of it, they kind of everybody wants to have that character that can tell that they've lived through the
Yep.
battle of the forging of the One Ring or whatnot. And but those are kind of hard encounters to sort of run, I think.
They can be difficult. I've done quite a few of those kind of large scale battles, and I'm always planning the next one, and it's always different. I don't know if I'm ever really improving it or just like trying something else, trying something else out. But they're always memorable.
Depending on the degree of Zoom as well, they could take up in lengthy sessions. This particular set of battles took up a whole month essentially of just the battle.
It
So
was
forced
six sessions.
6 sessions.
Six sessions, yeah.
Session.
Um, Whereas there'll be similarly epically sized battles that will happen in a single die roll, because your character is not part of it. It's happening off in the periphery, and you're the king who's organizing it, and you're just looking for outcome here. And that could be still built up to a degree of gravity, but that's getting beyond our topic. Memorable combat terrain is what we're sort of focusing in on here, I think.
I guess the last thing would be like I want to shout out to if you've ever used it, Maze Rat's roll tables. It's a PDF that I think you can find on ThreeRPG, and I generally don't use them as intended for like random roll encounters or traps or whatever, but sometimes I will refer to them because of the sheer amount of thought put into the tables. Like you'll look at them and you can handpick whatever you want out of it, and it's great. Great for like if you need inspiration for for a random encounter or for like a certain situation and seeing what's possible.
I would recommend if GMs were running a situation where players are in a battle and it's a battle that is sort of beyond the scope of the initial encounter, that it's a giant war or a naval combat or something like that, to openly throw in every few rounds a series of saving throws or additional non-encounter rolls that all players have to make in order to kind of dodge a volley of arrows or cannon shot or something like that just comes to whittle away whatever combat economy that's there, and that can be indicated or otherwise depending on the necessities of your game group.
That's a really good point. From a player perspective, these large scale battles, you can almost start to lose touch with the character that got into that mess. So bringing it back down to that gritty battlefield level, have them just barely miss, being cannon fodder, get you right back in that mindset. So definitely go large, but then get right back down in there into the mud.
R.I.P. Amaris.
Thanks.
right back down in
Too
the mud.
soon.
As you said.
Too
Too soon. Sorry, we had a character death 2 weeks ago.
Another one for the character sheet graveyard.
Well, I think that's all we got for this week. Thanks for talking with you guys. Oh yeah.
Wait. Before we go, Jay, can you give us those teas one more time? Can you serve us some tea?
Serve us some tea. Okay, it's oolong cha, Earl Grey, green. It's thread, trap, timer, treat, terrain, and twist.
Get the twist.
What a twist!
What a twist! See you next week.